While walking through the Johnson Research and Development Lab, it almost feels like we are in some remote place, but we are in fact in the heart of Atlanta. Surrounded by patents, awards, and some relics from the past, you realize you were in the presence of quite a remarkable man. From a day job of creating spacecrafts for NASA and inventing for fun and night to becoming the king of all toy guns, Dr. Johnson has amassed more than fortune and fame. Dr. Johnson has left his mark on history. Welcome to Vault Empowers Talks, where we don't just scratch the surface. We dive deep into the lives of some of the world's most influential change makers, and today is no different. I'm your host, Brandy Harvey, and before I introduce my amazing guest for today, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you do not miss your daily dose of motivation and inspiration. But without further ado, I get to introduce this amazing man sitting next to me. Dr. Lonnie Johnson is an Air Force and NASA engineer, inventor of the best-selling toy of all time, the Super Soaker. Noted as the most powerful water gun ever, the Super Soaker has generated over $1 billion in sales. With over 160 patents to his name, Dr. Johnson continues to push innovation through his company, Johnson Research and Development, where he employs a diverse group of scientists and engineers. As a member of the National Inventors Hall of Fame, Lonnie believes that focus, determination, and perseverance can help you run into any problem and face it head on. Vault Empowers Talks welcome history maker and the king of all toy guns, Dr. Lonnie Johnson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Come on, give it up for that intro, Dr. Johnson. Don't be shy now. Don't be shy, Dr. Johnson. Listen.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here. What a wonderful introduction. I'm just, sometimes when I hear people read all of that stuff, I think to myself, geez, that sounds interesting. I'd like to meet him one day.
Listen, it sounds interesting, and I am so excited to talk to you. I mean, you were the creator of the Super Soaker, and we were talking before we got on camera. I'm the same age as the Super Soaker. You know this, Dr. Johnson.
So, 82.
1982,
That's
child. Some good stuff that came out in 1982, okay?
That was the birth of the idea.
Listen, but 1982, you didn't just walk in to say, I'm going to make a Super Soaker. I mean, really take us back. You grew up in Mobile, Alabama, in the Deep South during segregation. 1968 was really a pivotal year for you. Senior year
in high school, and I've always been a tinkerer and interested in inventing, and I wanted to be an engineer before I even knew the word was engineering.
Yeah.
So my senior year in high school, I've been working on a number of projects, various different things. Even at one point was into rockets. But my senior year, actually it was in the 11th grade that I decided I wanted a big project to work on, something that I wouldn't finish so easily and so quickly as I had been doing up to then. And so I decided I wanted to build this robot. I had seen robots on TV, and I wanted to have my own robot. Nobody told me that those robots had people inside. So this was 1968. Digital technology didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
Robots were more something of the imagination than they were reality.
Yeah. But the reality of it, though, you were growing up in the Deep South in segregation. So the same year Martin Luther King is assassinated,
right.
Robert Kennedy, all the things that were happening, George Wallace gets on the steps and says segregation.
Just a few years before.
Right. So all of this is happening that's shaping your childhood.
And my outlook on the world. Absolutely.
Yeah. While you're mixing rocket fuel in the kitchen.
Yeah. And even then, geez, as a child, some things haven't changed. As a child, I can remember we'd be playing in the street, playing stickball or foursquare or whatever in front of our house. All the kids in the neighborhood would be out playing. But whenever we'd see a police car, we'd all run and hide.
Yeah.
I never thought about why that was until I got much older and learned about how blacks were often picked up and basically arrested on trumped-up charges just as a source of labor, free labor, for where the prison system would basically rent them out or hire them out to private corporations. But that was what my childhood was like. We used to run and hide. I was chased, as a small child by whites who would come through the neighborhood. That was all of that had a definite impact on my outlook on the world. But as I grew older and started placing things into perspective.
We are in your facility right now. We are in the heart of Atlanta, and we get all the noises of the city, right?
So as I started gotten older, I began to place things into perspective, and you realize that human nature plays a really big part in self-identity, self-pride, and even fear, distrust of the other.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, there are people who take advantage of that and try to exploit that, particularly from a political perspective. And we need to be more conscious of our natural tendencies in terms of being in touch with our better angels, and not let those kind of negative feelings dominate our outlook on the world and how we see each other in the world.
Yeah. I mean, 1968, you win. You're the first Black person to win the state science fair.
Well, it was more than the state science fair. So I started building my robot. It took about a year to finish it. And a lot of the science fairs had actually come and gone. I missed a lot of them because he wasn't ready. I didn't have him finished. So the final one was being held at the University of Alabama, and this is where Governor Wallace had stood in the door earlier and said no Black students would ever attend this university. But there I was in the spring. I must have been around March timeframe with my robot. Only Black student there with a project. There was a couple other kids from my high school there. They'd done some technical reports and things that they read. But I had a real project. And my robot won first place. So that was a real personal moral victory that obviously had a big impact on my outlook on the world, because a lot of things were being said about us as kids, because my senior year was the last year the year before my high school was integrated. So whites were coming on TV at that time and saying they didn't want their kids going to school with those heathens, and they should put us all in sykes and ship us back to Africa.
Wow.
And so we were listening to these kind of things on the TV when we get home in the evenings. And so they were saying just terrible things about us. And so that victory really meant a lot in terms of building my self-confidence and realizing that, there at the University of Alabama, where they had students from all over the Southeast United States participating in this conference that was sponsored by what was called the Junior Engineering Technical Society.
Oh, wow.
And I was very proud to be a member of that. In fact, I was president of my chapter at my high school. And so this is the personification of being an engineer, and so I was identifying very well. And so winning first place and having kids from all over the Southeast participate in my project winning out. Fortunately, the judges were from industry and not from the University of Alabama, and they were very objective in their evaluation of what I had done, because Lonnie was a tall robot. He was fully remote control and programmable.
Yeah.
Digital technology didn't exist back then. I used my sister's tape recorder to record the signals that I would transmit to it, so I could rewind it and play it back so it could go through the same motion. So that was my brother's walkie-talkie was the way I got the signals into the robot. It was a whole series of just running into challenges and solving the problems as they came up. For example, I'd gone to the library to learn how to build a remote control circuit, and I didn't have a mentor or an engineer or anybody with the technical background to provide the guidance and mentoring that I needed. So I was pretty much on my own. So I'd read this book about how to build a remote control circuit. My Parent-Teachers Association at my high school actually gave me some money, $50, to go out and buy all the components.
Wow, $50.
$50. So I had
what
all
could
the
we do with
components.
$50 now? This is like somebody like that's Uber Eats money.
That's true. Very, very good point. So I bought all these little miniature vacuum tubes and put the circuit together. And then the next step in the instruction said to use a frequency analyzer to tune the receiver and the transmitter to the same frequency. And I had no idea what a frequency analyzer was, and nobody that I knew what a frequency analyzer was, so I was stuck. But then I got the idea of solving that problem by using my sister's walkie-talkie, because I could hardwire one to transmit the signal and the other one to receive it. I get the signal into the robot, and then I could decode it using rubber bands and stepper contact circuits and things. It was really, really.
I mean, people don't understand, like, this is really, like, this is almost like considered prehistoric right now, because we think of all the immediate technology that we can just click and tap through now. You're at the library, you are like researching. This is the land of encyclopedia still and card catalogs. So this is a whole different even ball game of research.
Yeah, this is a whole different world.
Yeah.
I mean, digital technology, no, this was all analog. You know, this was back in the time frame when we still had black telephones and party lines.
I mean, so much so that one of the stories that really stood out to me when I was doing my research for you is, you know, you talked about how you liked rockets, right? And you used to be mixing up rocket fuel on the stove.
Yeah.
You almost blew up the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then, you know, your dad was like, okay, let's move this outside. You know, your parents never stifled your your creativity. You know, they always kind of encouraged you.
Tolerated me.
They tolerated you.
Yeah, the robot that I just talked about, it was a big project. I mean, a lot of components. I never counted how many parts there were in there, but you know, a lot of the relay circuit, switches and things like that open different valves. It was a very complicated device or robot, a lot of different parts, but all of this was built in my mother's kitchen.
In the kitchen.
kitchen.
You just dominating the house at this point.
I must have taken over half the kitchen with screws and nuts and soldering irons and wrenches and a lot of scrap metal and all kinds of things that went into this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so much so that your brother took some rocket fuel to school one day and y'all kind of ended up in jail for a little bit.
Well, we didn't end up in jail, thank God, but we did end up at the police station. So yeah, I was into rocket fuel, and yeah, you know, I was used to mix it on the stove until my dad came, until a fire almost happened, and my dad brought me a hot plate and said, "You got to do this outside from now on," and so I didn't get any punishment or anything like that.
Yeah.
So they were really patient with me, but my brother did mix some rocket fuel and took it to school and lit it on the hallway at the school. And I'm sitting in math class, right? I'm real studious and doing, you know, trying to keep up with my schoolwork. And I get this announcement on the PA system, Lonnie Johnson, report to the principal's office. You know what that's like, right?
You already know. I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble.
So
what did I do?
Want me in the principal's office for?
Yeah.
I'm like, of course, I get down to the principal's office, and there's my brother with some of his friends, and they're all sitting there. I'm like, well, what's going on? I had no idea. And so it turned out that he had brought some of the rocket fuel to school, and they lit it on the hallway. And the principal had called the police. They came in, took us all downtown, and I'm sitting there scared to death.
I know you are.
Oh my goodness! But I didn't do it. And I'm trying to explain this. They accused us of trying to blow up the school.
Blow up the school. Yeah.
And I'm like, but it's rocket fuel. It's not rocket. It's not a bomb. It won't blow up anything. And so we're sitting there, and after a while, they actually got a report from the laboratory, and they came back and said that, you know, they said what the ingredients were, and I'm like, wow, they reverse engineered and analyzed.
You were like, can I get the printout, please? I need this for my research.
I was so impressed that they could look at the product of the reaction and actually figure out what the original ingredients were. I really thought that was really cool. I was impressed. And I'm like, see, I told you it wasn't a bomb. And they said, oh, no, we have to change the charge from trying to blow up the school to arson. And I'm like, oh.
They weren't trying to blow it up. They were trying to burn it down. Listen.
So I'm like, oh, geez, I'm sitting there still. And eventually, we spent most of the day down there, and eventually they called my high school principal and asked him what did he want, what he wants them to do. And he said, send them home.
Wow.
And so that was the end of it.
Yeah.
I was very relieved. Of course, when I got home, of course, I had to deal with my dad. But I didn't get any punishment there either. And I think they knew that it wasn't me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wouldn't intentionally do something like that. But, I talk about that because if I had done that today in this environment, if someone had done that, I mean, the whole outcome would be very different.
Yeah.
And the principal wouldn't have even had the ability to apply his own judgment and weigh who I am versus, whether I was, someone else who was really trying to be destructive.
Yeah.
So the importance of being patient with students and tolerating the childhood pranks and curiosity and exploration, testing the limits, all the things that kids do.
Yeah.
That's part of growing and learning.
Yeah. But you use this analogy of children are like the snowball going down the hill.
Boy, you really have done your homework.
That's why I'm here. I was coming to speak to the good doctor. Listen, I had to have my notes done. This is a researcher.
Yeah, and I use that analogy. I first came up with that idea because I was invited to give a talk at an event in Mobile where the schools were having their opening meeting with all the teachers in the district there, and they had invited me to come in and give a talk, and they asked me, well, do I have any advice for the teachers?
Yeah.
And my advice was basically be careful of the feedback that you give children because you have great influence in shaping their self-identity. And kids are like snowballs rolling down a hill. If you have a kid rolling down a hill where they're getting in trouble and they're getting a lot of criticism and negative feedback, then you're going to start feeling like, geez, I'm a troublemaker and that's who I am. I'm always getting in trouble. And they start owning it, and this becomes their self-identity. And they grow up and pride step in, well, I'm a troublemaker. I might as well be the best troublemaker I can be.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you have a kid rolling down a hill where they're getting positive reinforcement and feedback, say, boy, you're great, you work hard, geez, you're so smart, and all these encouraging, geez, you come up with really clever ideas, and that becomes your self-identity, and you start experiencing success, and you get feedback, that positive feedback, and that becomes addictive rather, and you want to get more and more of that. So be careful of the feedback. You be careful which hill you put a child on, because you really are the ones putting them on that hill.
Yeah. For decades, he has used his gift to shift the lives of people around the world. But his impact is unparalleled as he continues to ignite the creative spark in the next generation of inventors. Dr. Johnson believes the need for children to explore technology is enormous, and what we are witnessing at the Johnson STEM Activity Center is students from the community having the ability to discover the process of building through Legos, STEM, and robotics. And you were really set up on this hill of being encouraged, because coming out of a science fair that you win in the state takes you on this journey to the Air Force, to NASA, all the space missions, Mars observatory stuff. I mean, you've done some very, very phenomenal things in your career.
The things that, people ask me what drives me, and I think I figured it out. It's curiosity.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering what's possible. I went to JPL and because I wanted to know how they did that. When I was in the Air Force, fortunately I had a chance to work on the Voyager project, and we were doing safety analysis, looking at things that could go wrong with the launch that could cause release of plutonium, which is a nuclear radioactive material, to the biosphere. And, no one wanted that to happen, so we would do a lot of tests, a lot of risk analysis and things like that to try and get an assessment of what the risk would be. And I was a technical support person on what was called the Interagency Nuclear Safety Review Panel, and that panel was a representative from the Air Force Department of Energy. and NASA, and they made launch approval recommendations to the president, so they had to make sure that it was safe to do the launch, right? But I got to thinking, if the guys over there who were designing the system did the job right and it was really, really very reliable, no one would care about the second guessing, the safety analysis, and the what if things that we were doing. So I wanted to be on the other side of the fence. I wanted to go over and help design the spacecraft and the system and also figure out how it is that they did that, because you'd hear about a launch or mission going, to some other planet, for example, to Jupiter, Saturn, or even Voyager, which is what I worked on. But you hear about things going wrong with the spacecraft.
Yeah.
And then you hear a report later on, well, the mission's back on, everything is fine. I'm like, I know they didn't go up and fix that thing. So how do they recover the mission, even though the spacecraft is, billions of miles away from Earth? So I went to JPL. I worked on the Galileo project to Jupiter, the Cassini mission to Saturn, and the Mars Observer project. Mars Observer, we did lose. When we did the orbit insertion burn at Mars, we didn't hear from the spacecraft again. But that actual spacecraft was built by a contractor, not by NASA.
Oh, okay. So people who are like outside contractors actually
work on, even back then.
Yeah.
So this whole thing of commercializing space and getting private companies to do more and more, that pattern that has led to what Musk and others are doing now started way back then.
Yeah.
In any case, what I learned was that it was just a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
It was anticipating things that could go wrong, making sure that there were backup systems, plans, make sure that the systems and components were as reliable as possible, a lot of testing, just a lot of hard work.
A lot of hard work.
Yeah.
Which 1982, which, I said in the beginning, I'm the same age as the Super Soaker. You are trying to come up with a water pump.
Yeah, a heat pump, actually.
A new heat pump.
It's a refrigeration system that would use water as a working fluid instead of Freon, because Freon's bad for the environment. And so I had hooked these nozzles I had machined up to the bathroom sink, and I was doing this experiment, and I just happened to turn and shoot a stream of water across the bathroom, and I thought it was very satisfying, and I felt like a high-performance water gun would be a lot of fun. So I decided I was going to design a high-performance water gun, and I wanted it to be something that would hold a lot of water, that could operate at very high pressure, and that a small kid could operate.
Yeah.
So I designed a pump so it would be very easy to pressurize to very high pressure, designed it so it would hold a lot of water.
So this right here is really one of the first prototypes.
This is one of the first. It's not the exact first, but it's the first time I put the bottle on top.
Wow. And you had like a 2-liter bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's some with it. This is about a liter. This was the first one. There was another. The 2-liter bottle came in the next generation.
Okay.
The company contacted me and says, well, we've been trying to come up with the Super Soaker is successful. We're trying to come up with the next year's version.
Yeah.
And we've been kicking around and we haven't been able to come up with anything. So what can you do? So I came up with another version that had a bigger bottle and actually had 2 bottles. So that this one, when you pump it up, you compress the air into the bottle. The other one, you pump it, you actually pump water into a second bottle that made the pumping even more efficient. So, but this one is the first gun. This is the one that I presented at Laramie in 87.
You
in
go
89,
to,
I'm sorry, in 89.
And when you went to the toy fair up in New York.
So I went to a toy fair in New York with the idea of finding someone who'd be interested. Now, this is after a lot of false starts. So from 82 to 89.
What are you doing between 82 and 89?
I was in the Air Force. I was working on advanced. I gone back in the active duty in the Air Force, and I was working on. I was at Strategic Air Command headquarters, which was SAC, Strategic Air Command back then, and I was on the staff of the general who was responsible for all 3 legs of the triad, all of the nuclear bombers, the land-based missiles, and the submarine-launched ballistic missiles. Targeting those missiles were handled in the headquarters where I was.
Wow.
At SAC headquarters. So I was on his staff, and my job at the time was advanced space systems that could help SAC achieve its mission. And of course, back then there was there was not interest in putting weapons in space, and but we were coming up with some interesting concepts that, and we were advocating for funding for those concepts. And then from there, I went to the Edwards Air Force Base and worked as a flight test engineer. In fact, the first flight test engineer assigned by the Strategic Air Command to the B-2 bomber. So I was
on the B-2 bomber
at Edwards Air Force Base. And so we were setting up to basically take the B-2 through its flight test program to make sure that it would indeed meet SAC's mission.
And this is your side hustle.
This is my side project.
You doing all this, and this the side piece. Okay,
Yeah,
the side piece is getting, with the potential to change your whole life. Here comes the thing you're tinkering with.
That brings up an interesting story because this was 89. By 89, I was actually back at JPL. I left the Air Force, I think it was 87. And I worked on the B-2. I decided while I was at SAC that I did definitely want to get out of the Air Force and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So when I got assigned to Edwards Air Force Base, and I was working on my projects, this was one of my side hustles.
One of the
The
side
other ones
hustles.
were some other inventions. I had about 6 different projects, and I felt, okay, I've got the odds. In any kind of business venture, you say, okay, there are a lot of things outside of my control. And you just realistically, you know that there are things that can go wrong with any type of, especially when they're high risk, high payoff, which is what inventing is. So I had 6 different projects, any one of which, the water gun was one of them. I had an airplane that was water propelled. I had a new type of heat pump that would use water as a working fluid. I had what was called a centrifugal force engine, which was a new type of engine that was really intriguing. Those people who have technical backgrounds might understand, if you have this thing called natural convection flow, if you heat water, and you have 2 columns of water, the one that you heat, the density would decrease and it would rise, and so you get this circulation.
Right.
And so you can actually cause the water to circulate by heating one column and cooling the other. And I said to myself, that's pretty neat. And gravity is a body force, right? If I heat one column and cool the other one and increase the force, I get more circulation force. And so I use centrifugal force as a way of getting more circulation. And the faster you go, the more force you get. So it sets up sort of a dilemma in terms of, well, okay, what are the real thermodynamic principles going on here? That's another whole story. We'll get into that. But in any case, so I had all these projects going in parallel, and I'm thinking that any one was all I needed.
Yeah.
So I requested separation from the Air Force, which is, as an officer, you have to do that 6 months in advance. So I requested a date of separation. And as that 6 months rolled around, each one of those projects fell by the wayside, got delayed, something went wrong. Even the water gun, false start on that one also. And so there I was, one more opportunity. I had some investors in California who said they were going to invest in the one of my projects. And I said, okay, now if we're going to do this, we need to go forward because I'm about to get out of the Air Force, and I have time to change my mind. They'll let me pull my separation papers. They said, oh, no, don't worry about it, Mr. Johnson, everything's fine. And so then about 2 weeks into it, before the deadline, I kept calling them, and I couldn't get anybody. And I kept calling. About a week after the deadline had passed, okay, Mr. Johnson, we can get started on raising these funds soon. We need you to pay this, and this fee, and this fee. I'm like, wait a minute.
How am I paying these fees?
Why am I got to pay you?
Y'all supposed to be investing in me.
Be investing in. So, after cursing them out, the reality set in. Okay, I've got a family of 5, including myself, to support. I was in base housing. I need to move off base. I hadn't looked for a job. So, and then I had a house in Los Angeles from where I was staying when I was at JPL. It was under contract to sell. I said, okay, I'm going to need somewhere for my family to live. So I started backing out of that contract and got sued.
Wow.
So at that point, I had no job, no income, nowhere to live, and and sued for $125,000. The rock bottom, like, oh my God, it was scary.
Wow.
I had never been sued before. I mean, this was just totally debilitating. Managed to recover from all of that. Called up JPL, and they were happy to have me come back. But it took a few months for everything to fall into place. Eventually settled the lawsuit, got my family back. Everything's all stable. But that was a real hardship. But my mind was made up. I was going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So as soon as I got stable, I tried it again. And the second time, Super Soaker became successful. The first toy that actually came out was Jamming Jet. It was a water-propelled airplane.
I heard this story.
Yeah.
I heard this story about it's something about it would take off, but then it would like
dive into the ground.
Right into the ground. Yeah.
Because the engineer at the toy company I remember he used to brag about how good he was at being a model airplane expert, and he was also an ex-Israeli Air Force pilot, and he just was just bragging all the time. And so when I demonstrated the airplane, and the president of the company saw it, and they said, wow, that's great. So he got his team to start, and this is the guy, Eric, can't remember his name now, it's years ago. Dundee, I think it was. But in any case, eventually they called me. They couldn't get the airplane to fly. So they flew me up. This was a big deal. I mean, they actually flew me up to New York, put me up in a first-class hotel in Manhattan, gave me a limo, a driver, and the whole 9 yards. I'm like, oh, wow, this is really cool. Went over to the model shop and looked at what they were doing, and so I started giving them pointers and explaining what was wrong with what they were doing. And they finally when I showed them pictures, they, what did you do, drop that thing out of an airplane or something? How you get it up that high? They just couldn't believe it. But anyway, when I explained what was wrong, they got it to fly. And then they started fine-tuning it. Started flying so well that they would lose the airplane. It would just catch a thermal. It was basically a glider once you propelled it up. And so they decided they wanted to fly in a circle so the kids wouldn't lose their airplanes. And I'm like, well, maybe that means they'll buy another airplane.
Exactly.
Especially if it flies really great. They said, no. And then so they decided to put the tail at an angle so it would fly in a circle. And I'm like, don't do it that way. I'm trying to contact the company. They wouldn't. I called the president. He wouldn't listen. I couldn't get anybody to listen. Mm. And so they manufactured all the airplanes. It was about 60,000 airplanes, put $1 million in the TV advertising on top of that. And they did the big launch, Jamming Jets. And great commercial. But every one of them had this thing where the airplane would fly in a circle. And airplanes get their lift from the wings moving through the air, right? So if you got one wing moving faster than the other, it's going to give you more lift. So it just literally would roll over and dive into the ground and break into a million pieces. First flight right out of the box. And so that was a flop. They never got the water gun out of their model shop. And that company eventually went out of business because they had other internal problems. So I got rights back and started hitting the pavement again. This is when I went to New York to Toy Fair and was looking for someone to talk to. And that's where I met the people at Laramie.
And so it's 1989 at this point.
Right.
The Super Soaker's already 7 years old.
Right.
And so now you're up there hustling, hitting the pavement at the Toy Fair, trying to see who's
walking the halls.
Who wants to roll the dice.
Yeah, walking the halls. I met this guy named Bob Kersey on the hallway and got to talking to him, told him I didn't have the water gun with me, by the way.
So you were just pushing an idea.
Right. So he told me, to go down and talk to the people at Laramie because he knew they were in the toy water gun business. And this was during a trade show, and at Toy Fair, to get into a toy company's showroom, you had to be invited or you had to know, because it was the toy industry, quote unquote, the president of Laramie, my young son at the time, it's a very treacherous industry. Everybody knocks everybody off. Now, Laramie at the time was a knockoff company. They would look at the big companies like Hasbro and Mattel and see what they were advertising, what their product line was, and come up with cheap versions.
Oh, they like the Sheen. That was like Sheen,
they would
Fashion
get
Nova back in
maybe
the day.
10% of the market or so, whereas the majors who were doing the TV commercials, they would dominate the market. So they were just looking for opportunities to get a piece of the market that way. So anyway, Bob suggested ask for Al Davis and tell him Bob Kersey sent you. So that got me in the door, got me into the meeting, and I got to talk to Al, who was the vice president of the company. And I started telling him I had this idea for a water gun. It's a high-performance water gun. And he says, well, that sounds very interesting. We're at Toy Fair now talking to buyers. All the stores are there, and they're making deals for what's going to show up in the stores. I can't review, inventions and ideas now, but the headquarters for my company is in Philadelphia. If you're ever in the area, come in. We're happy to talk to you. And I said, okay, great. So I'm thinking, geez, I've got an opportunity. I've got a new relationship that I'm going to have an opportunity to build here. So as I was leaving, he says, but don't make a special trip. He just burst my bubble right off the bat.
Don't go out your way now.
Don't go out and make a special trip. I'm like, geez. So I get home and immediately started building a prototype because I had not gotten the last prototype from Intertech was the name of that company. So I had to build a whole new prototype. And this is the first time I put the bottle on top.
So 1989, you have to go build a prototype after you have this meeting to present. You have to have something to present.
Right.
And you go home and make the prototype.
Right.
1989.
Right.
Wow. So
this
then,
is after different versions. Like, I had made bodies where the water was actually pressurized inside the body of the gun. But there were different problems with that, trying to glue and put something together like that and then still have it hold pressure. So this was to solve the pressure problem and containment problem. Use a bottle that was designed to hold pressure.
So all the false starts, you have years of false starts that you had along the way. What gets you to 1991 and I'm about to come out with the hottest toy that changes the game?
Let's see. The false starts, you talk about that. The first one, when I came, I got the gun working, and I'm thinking, geez, I'm going to manufacture this myself, and I'm going to start a company and get invested. And so,
like most entrepreneurs, I'm going to do it all by myself.
Went and talked to a plastic injection molding company who could make all the components, right? And I'm waiting to see what this is going to take and everything. And a few weeks later, I get a call saying, okay, Mr. Johnson, we got it all figured out. It's going to cost $200,000 to get the first 1,000 guns off the line. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. $200,000 for 1,000 guns? That's $200 a gun.
A gun, yeah.
Who's going to pay that?
These are real guns.
I didn't understand amortization of tooling and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
I was, working for NASA in the military, so I didn't have the business insight. So I decided there were some things I needed to learn, and so that's when I started this whole process of finding a company to license to so that I could learn how the ins and outs of actually taking a product to market and doing business. And that turned out to be a pretty beneficial experience. So in any case, so I'm there. It took about 2 weeks to build this particular prototype.
Wow.
And then I called up the company and I said, I'm going to be in your area next week.
I'm on the way. I'm on the way.
Just happened to be in your area. I was wondering if you'd be available for a meeting.
All the false starts and then the starting and stopping and regrouping along the way.
Yeah, all this time I'm working for the Air Force, NASA, and doing out-of-planetary spacecraft, things like that,
But I think that's what most entrepreneurs fail to realize, right? That it's going to be a number of false starts along the way.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be a number of times when the door looked open, but it wasn't.
I will say that I expected that. That's why I had 6 projects going in parallel, because I figured things outside of my control, I was trying to allow for all of those things to happen and still be successful.
Yeah.
So I anticipated that. I wanted to put the odds in my favor. But yeah, a lot of false starts, a lot of reasons to give up. I can remember sitting down and I'd be at my machine. I had a little Unimat lathe and milling machine where I couldn't make all the plastic components. And I'd stop and think, geez, I can imagine things and turn that idea into reality. I can have gears moving in my head, and I can, just see all the moving parts and make each one and then put it all together. Why am I having such a hard time?
Yeah.
Very, very frustrating. But eventually, perseverance pays off. You learn.
I mean, in a major way, because 1991 is when the Super Soaker hits the market.
Well, actually, let's see. I presented it to Laramie in '89. It came on the market in 1990. They made record time in getting it out. The first year it came out was called the Trencher, and it was just blowing up. And someone came in and claimed that they owned the trade name Trencher, and they wanted to be paid royalties, so we changed the name to Super Soaker.
Wow.
Then that same guy came back and said they wanted a piece of and they started writing letters to people, to buyers, the Kmart, Walmart, all the retail outlets, saying, if you buy this gun, I'm going to sue you, because they owe me money.
Wow.
So he literally tried to exploit the opportunity, because he had invented some guns before then and felt like he just deserved it, I guess. Anyway, we ended up suing him, and we won. And, because he literally did attempt extortion and a lot of other things. And, I think the jury awarded punitive damages that were far beyond what we had even asked for, even thought about asking for.
Oh, goodness.
Because it was so egregious. So, yeah, this gun was actually an exhibit in that court case.
Wow.
I testified on the witness stand, the whole 9 yards.
What? That is crazy. So it originally was the Drencher, gets changed to the Super Soaker because of some sort of copyright trademark infringement.
Well, claim. It was flaky, but rather than deal with it, we just sidestepped the whole issue.
And so a year it's out as the Super Soaker, it becomes the number one.
The next year it came out. So 90 it hit the market. 91 is when they decided to put it on TV. 92 it was number one in the world. 10 years later.
10 years later, it becomes the number one selling toy.
After a lot of false starts and frustration, yes.
I mean, but I think that that's the beauty of this story, and that's what makes you so remarkable, because most people think that you jump out the gate and you're just immediately successful. And you're like, yo, this thing was 10 years old before it even hit.
Yeah, that's a good point. And but people, I talk about what I'm doing now, and I tell people, yeah, they're going to call me lucky. I'm going to say, oh, you're so lucky. I think blessed is probably a better description, because I do feel that, God has been giving me a gift.
Yeah.
And I feel, like it would be a waste and sin to waste it. I have to apply it and use my talent to the maximum extent possible. Also, I'm being dishonest and less than what I could be. So for that reason, I continue to work pretty hard. But I want to prove that it was not luck. So then I said, I want to be the king of all toy guns.
And here comes Nerf.
So I started. Nerf gun was already out, but I decided to take those guns to another level altogether as well. So I started redesigning the Nerf guns, and all of the ones I developed worked a lot better than what Hasbro had at the time, and did things that the guns that Hasbro had couldn't do.
Yeah.
Like a fully automatic machine gun, for example. All operating on compressed air. You pump it up and just pull the trigger and it would just go.
But what I learned is they didn't really want to cut you a deal, but they didn't want you to take it to their competitor.
They didn't really come out and say that. I concluded that because they already had the market. And the only reason for doing the deal was because they were going to make more money
Yeah.
with what I had, or they, obviously there was a risk that they could take it to I could take my product line, because I had a whole line. I had little ones, big ones, medium size,
Wow.
just a whole product line, and all had different features. And so, yeah, we did that deal. The Nerf became a number one selling line. I asked for my own category under Nerf. It was called In-Strike, and it became the number one selling Nerf product. I'd say about 80% of Nerf at one point was In-Strike. And so between Super Soaker and In-Strike, Nerf In-Strike, I had about 80% of the toy gun
all
market
the toy gun market
based on my patent. So
yeah,
to me that was a scenario of determination.
You were your own snowball, though.
Yeah,
you talk about that snowball.
Setting a goal and
Yeah.
working hard to achieve it, and it's a matter of perseverance. So yeah, and maybe that's the talent. I just don't know how to give up.
You don't know how to give up, and I think that speaks to even, what has afforded you the opportunity to do now, because you have not stopped. The Super Soaker and the Nerf gun were really just a continuation of all of your inventions.
Well, what I tell people sometimes when I'm talking, because of the success of Super Soaker and Nerf, I was able to buy my freedom.
You got your freedom papers. Listen, I know you did. Listen.
So now I'm working on things that I feel are real challenges, trying to address some of the environmental challenges that we face. I've invented a new engine that converts heat directly into electricity. I started working on the next generation of batteries beyond lithium ion literally about 25 years ago, before the know-how or technology existed, with the idea of, okay, at some point, the battery industry is going to realize that solid-state batteries have got to be the next thing beyond lithium-ion, because I'd done an analysis based on some results I'd seen at Oak Ridge National Laboratory that showed that solid-state batteries could hold twice the energy of lithium-ion, but you couldn't make solid-state batteries in any way that was reasonable. You could only make these little tiny micro batteries in a sputter deposition machine that took a lot of energy, and you break the material down and coat one molecule, a few molecule layers at a time. The whole thing would be like 7 units of a meter thick, and you could rub your finger across it. You couldn't tell a battery was there, but you could conduct leads to it and actually charge and discharge and get these little tiny amounts of power. And but I did an analysis just looking at what was there and realized that it was for its size. If I had a big version of that, it would hold about 4 times the energy of lithium ion. So I started a research project to figure out how to make solid-state ceramic batteries at a cost that was comparable to lithium ion, with the idea that eventually the battery industry would realize that's the next step, and I'd be there waiting with the technology, with the patents and everything all solved.
I mean, ahead of the game all the time.
Literally 25 years. And now we have arrived. So the battery industry realized that lithium, solid-state batteries is the next thing, next generation. The whole auto industry, everybody's looking for the solution, and we have it. People don't know we have it because we haven't been very public about our research over the past 25 years. But it's been it's like trying to find a cure for cancer. You got to go down all these different techniques, do all these mental experiments, and then go in the lab and test it out and see if that would work. We could make solid electrolyte. We could make cathode material. You put them together, they react, you get something else. It wasn't a battery. All of this. So we literally, at this point, have patents on our materials. We buy raw materials from the chemical supply house, and we formulate our own electrolyte as a glass in-house. And we make the cathodes in-house. We center all of that. We put them together. We make batteries at about 600 degrees centigrade, and they don't catch fire. It's like right now you may be aware of the fact that lithium-ion batteries catch fire. And they have a limited range for in electric vehicles, about 300 miles. But think of a battery that doesn't catch fire, and you can go 600 miles.
Wow.
So this is the kind of impact that we've been developing and now have working cells.
I mean, you're here in Atlanta because we are at your research facility here in Atlanta, at the heart of the city. And all of this is taking place here. And you made a decision years ago to move to Atlanta for this very reason, because you wanted to be somewhere where you could get raw materials easily. I think the airport and the city has something to do with that.
Right.
But I think you're also changing the game, because over 85% of the scientists and engineers that work for you are Black or people of color.
Right.
And so as a person who did not see people who look like you in this industry growing up, you were watching young Tom Edison and George Washington Carver were like the role models that you could really pull from. Right. And so now you're really creating a space of diversity and creativity and ingenuity right here in the heart of Atlanta.
Well, the space we're in, I mean, this is our what we call JSAC, the Johnson STEM Activity Center, where we work with grade school kids and get them interested in STEM. We have this program. We work with robotics in the first robotics program. This space here, we partner with Meta to set up a virtual reality space. We set up a relationship with the 80 Zone, which is Steve Young and Jerry Rice's nonprofit, NFL stars, of course.
Yeah.
To set up a esports arena. And the whole idea is to get kids performing, doing things with science and technology, having fun with it before they realize that what they're doing is science and technology.
Yeah, yeah.
So and it gets back to the snowball rolling down the hill. You want them to get used to experiencing success and enjoying it to the point where they want more success. They want to experience and continue to have those kind of experiences. And so they have fun doing engineering stuff before they realize they're doing engineering, science, math.
Yeah.
But the other point I would make too is that when I bought the site here, public housing was on either side. Grady Homes here and Capitol Homes on the other side, which was, the projects basically.
Yeah.
So we were literally in the inner city, and my goal was to set up manufacturing because I'd had a conversation with Dr. Ed Irons, who was the first Black PhD from Harvard in economics. And he told me, Johnson, true economic development is one thing to do trade within the community and have goods going back and forth, but if you want to have true economic development, you create a product, ship it out, and bring wealth into the community.
Yeah.
And so my thing then was to create manufacturing jobs so we can actually ship product out and bring wealth in. And that was the impact that I intended to have. Well, we got the technology from Oak Ridge, and we quickly realized, maybe not so quickly, but we realized you couldn't scale it and manufacture solid-state batteries. And rather than give up, persevere.
Yeah, yeah.
I decided to solve those problems, and it's taken a lot longer than I anticipated, but nobody else has beat us to the punch either, so we're ahead of the game still.
You are.
The motto here is simple. Let's give them an opportunity to build before we give them a ball. As Coach Bart so eloquently put it, if they have the desire and the discipline, they can be coachable. Each and every day, you can find a team of creators, engineers, and scientists here on site working, from the competitive STEM and robotics team to the team of scientists and engineers who are working on new energy technology.
I mean, most people, and I think so often you hear the conversation of when I retire, and I'm just trying to get to the point where I can retire. And you are proving that there is no retirement plan. Like, you are staying committed to being creative and using that curiosity. What keeps you going? Because I think most people need to hear that. Because you're a seasoned man, Dr. Johnson. You know what I'm saying? You're a seasoned man.
That's a nice way to put it.
That's it. You still home though. You look good. You're a seasoned man. But nothing about you is slowing down. And so what is it like? What piece of advice would you give to younger people? And I'm talking about people who 60 and younger.
Well, I think perseverance becomes a habit.
That's your word, perseverance.
Not giving up becomes a habit, and I think we would all be served to realize that. But also it's important to make sure that you're persevering in something that's going to be productive and beneficial,
Yeah.
as opposed to destructive and
Yeah.
not so beneficial.
Yeah.
But I think more than anything, perhaps, like I said, curiosity. You see a challenge and see, I wonder if I could really pull that off.
Yeah.
And you get enough confidence. You've experienced success, and you're looking for that one thing that you can really take on that really says, okay, I took on a tough challenge and I overcame that problem as well. So the desire for success becomes a habit.
The desire for success becomes a habit. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of the habit you want to instill in kids, a desire. Get them to experience success to the point where they enjoy the success and they want to have more. I don't think, people ask me, well, you made a lot of money on Super Soaker and the dart guns. Why? You could have just went and laid on the beach and just enjoyed life.
Yeah.
I would not have been happy laying on the beach. I would have
Your mind would have been thinking about, how do I convert this sand into some energy efficient product,
Yeah, I don't think my brain works that way. I can't.
So what is next for you? I know you got J-Tech, you have the robotics, you have the STEM program that you're running here, esports.
And the battery, we got the
you got the
batteries.
batteries.
Yeah,
is there something that's still on your radar that you haven't touched yet?
The challenge that the environmental challenges continues to loom, and clearly it's one that we all need to be mindful of. So the idea, and again, I used to get frustrated watching political debates in Congress and how one party would stymie in a discussion on addressing environmental change, and probably because a lot of the donors, big companies, have vested interests in keeping status quo going, and people tend to resist change just as a natural character of human beings, and that's, I attribute that even to racism. It's just people resist change. That's just who we are, and it makes us change makes us uncomfortable and fearful. But there are three pillars that I've identified: power generation, renewable power generation. I saw the sun as the ultimate source for energy. The sun by itself could supply all of our energy needs, and heat from the sun would be ideal. So that gave me the idea for the J-Tech. But now we've also discovered that there's geothermal energy in the earth. If you go down, in fact, our major investor in J-Tech is an oil and gas company who has abandoned and capped oil wells. And they said, well, there's geothermal heat down those holes. There's no oil anymore, but you can go down there and get some heat, and you can convert that heat into electricity. Just about 20% of the abandoned oil wells in the country apparently could supply all of the U.S. power needs.
Wow.
So, geez, that sounds like a great application for J-Tech. They invested in our company. We've spun it out. It's independent. We've got a new CEO who's doing a great job there. And then the other one is energy storage. So if you can produce the energy from a renewable, non-environmentally impacting source, produce the electricity, you need a way of storing the electricity. So that's why I launched the battery technology for electric vehicles and other applications as well, obviously. But that allows us to have transportation from renewable energy, electricity, and not impact the environment. And the third one that I'm now focused on, which I have not spun out, in fact, so far I'm the only one working on that, is water. And
oh, wow.
The entire world is water stressed. I just looked at some information, and being an engineer, I can do analysis and comparisons, which is really kind of cool. But I looked at the water flow of the Mississippi, and I looked at the water flow of the Colorado River, two major rivers in the U.S., right? Producing electrical power, we consume the equivalent flow of one of those rivers.
Wow.
And we're a water-stressed country, but and so energy is competing with agriculture and, of course, human consumption as well for water. So the U.S. is water-stressed. The rest of the world, most of the world, is water-stressed as well. So producing fresh water for agriculture as well as human consumption is the other technology that I'm focused on. And so what I've come up with is a way of producing water. I've got some economic ideas for producing water from ambient air, from humidity, condensing it. So there are desalination plants that take water from oceans and extract fresh water from that. But it turns out that the brine, concentrated brine going back into the ocean, that's impacting the ecosystem locally there, so it's doing some damage. So my approach is to make the atmosphere of the ocean that you extract the water from.
The atmosphere of the ocean.
Make the atmosphere your ocean, yes.
Oh, wow. I have never said
source.
that in conversation, Dr. Johnson. It's my first time talking about the atmosphere of the ocean, okay? Just know that. You are the first, okay?
Right. But that becomes a source of fresh water, so condensing it from the air is what this technology is about. So that is a third pillar.
Wow. You are not slowing down at all. So as we close out of this interview, because we have come to a close, and you keep dinking because they own you. They own you. You're hot, Dr. Johnson. You can't be this hot. That's what happens. You get older, you get hotter. So as we close out this interview, what's that one thing you would have told your younger self?
My younger self. I don't know. If I tell myself something that would have caused me to take a different path, there are a couple of things in hindsight, I wish I could have done different, but then I wouldn't know what I know.
Yeah, yeah.
There are a couple of things I would have done different, I think, but I don't know what I would tell myself. Be patient? No, I'm a pretty patient fellow. Persevere? I persevere pretty good. I didn't know how hard the battery project would be, but then if I hadn't started it, I wouldn't have the technology.
Yeah.
Get other people to invest in my project as opposed to using my own money. That's hard.
We all want to use other people's money, Doctor. That's the best people. Use other people's money. That's the advice.
I want to do. It's just like me going into Laramie. If I told this guy, I got this idea for a great water gun, and he looked at me, yeah. But having the model and putting it on in front of him, pumping it up and firing, and letting the quality and performance speak for itself.
Yeah.
They don't have to look at me and believe in me. So I don't know. I don't know. I have to think about that. Maybe ask me after I give it some thought.
I will.
What would I tell myself differently?
It doesn't have to be different. It could just be that one thing you would tell
advice?
your younger self.
I don't know.
I'm gonna say, because at 37 years old, when you came up with this idea of the Super Soaker and it hit when you was 42, you about to be paid. You know what I'm saying? I would have told myself that,
Well, I did get paid. I own all the patents. I think I could have negotiated a little bit tougher. Oh, one thing I would have done, but I did that. So Super Soaker, so it was a patent license, right? So based on the mechanism and performance of the gun. And when we had the problem with the branding, the Trencher name, I got a call from Laramie. He said, well, the president of the company said we need to change the name because, Trencher, this guy claims he owns it and we don't want to deal with it and fight with him. And so we're going to change it. And so in that conversation, we came up with the idea of Super Soaker. Let's call it that. Yeah, sounds good. So if I had realized the value of the brand, I would have said I want to own part of the brand and the name as well, because when the gun became successful, they started putting other product in the line that didn't use my patents, but it used the name Super Soaker, and so I didn't collect any income on that. But when I did the dart guns, I said, look, I want to have my own category on the Nerf. And you can call it whatever you like, but anything that's sold under that subcategory, you have to pay royalties on. They decided on the name N-Strike, and sure enough, N-Strike became #1 selling. They started putting all these other things under that product line, and they didn't pay royalties. And so I called him up one day and said, hey, look, oh, Mr. Johnson, you're misinterpreting the contract. I said, no.
Run me my money.
So anyway, we did end up with a lawsuit, and it did turn out that I was right because I had intentionally negotiated that, so it wasn't anything I was confused about. But we worked that out, and so that basically, I started to say they made me whole, but we settled the agreement and the dispute. I got out of the toy business, and now I'm totally focused on energy technology. So it's been one challenge after another, and it's been a process of taking on tougher and tougher problems.
Yeah. I think that's the real thing that sums up your life. Keep taking on tougher and tougher problems. I think most people, we give up so early, we quit too soon, we give up when it gets hard, and you're like, nope, that's when it really gets going, is when it gets hard. So I've really, really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. As we close out, one word you're committed to for this season of your life.
Perseverance.
That's it. I knew I was waiting on it. I said, if he don't say it, I'm going to say it for him. Perseverance.
Dr. Johnson says, the super soaker has spoiled me. If I'm going to be involved with something, then I want to take it to another level. And that, my friends, is exactly what he has done.
Listen, Dr. Johnson, you are remarkable. You are a history maker. You are a living legend. You are Black history. And so it is my honor to sit across from you today. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another inspiring conversation here at Vault Empowers Talks, where we dive deep into the lives of some of the world's most influential people, and today is no different. Until next time, you guys, eat well, give a damn, move your body every day. Peace.